This is Eurosec launch control. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ready now. Action.
Doppelgänger came about because we were, if you think about it, we were all part of the ATV team, if you like. And Joe Douglas was the head of drama for TV. And we were over at Elstree to have a luncheon thing that was going on. It might have been an award, I don't know. And Joe turned to me and said, have you got any ideas hovering around that we could use in our drama of the week? And I said, well, I'll have a look, because I kept everything, you know. And I looked through and I found Doppelgänger. It wasn't called Doppelgänger then. It was about the twin Earth and everything.
Everything's the wrong way round.
Why?
I thought, oh, this is really good. So I said to Jerry, you know, this is really good, this storyline. It's too good to go in for Play of the Week. I think we should try and set it up as a movie. Blue Grade, got Universal in. Once he knew Universal were on board, he said, right, I'll come in as well. He didn't want to do it on his own. And that's how it all grew up. And we'd worked now with a co-writer, and we got the script all going. And we had an American director who, he'd done things like, he'd been an editor, but he directed a Rita Hayworth movie or something. That was his claim to fame, you know, and he was very American in his approach, but that was fine.
Now, for the first time in a major British film studio, a feature film with actors is using a technique which allows the director to see exactly what the cameraman sees while the film is being shot. The film Doppelgänger, directed by Robert Parrish. Here, the film camera has a small television camera incorporated into its optical system. So, by watching a television set, the director can see instantaneously exactly what the film camera has photographed. So can everyone else working on the production. Now, the camera operator can either look through his viewfinder or watch a television screen on the side of his camera, which gives him a much larger picture that's easier to see.
Give that back to John Kane. Tell him I accept his apologies.
I sat for God knows how many days into a closed theatre watching for casting.
Ian Hendry, project director. Roy Thiss, the astronaut. Patrick Weimark, project controller.
Then I realised the politics of making an American movie, you know. We had Roy Thiss, the guy from The Invaders. It was a fantastic American series about aliens, really, you know, but, you know, it's from another planet. And it was very, very good, and he was very well known. It turned out that he was with Universal as well, so that helped. So I inquired about him, and they said, well, he's from Universal. And I said, oh, great. So we made contact, and yes, he would like to do it. I cast a girl that I'd seen in something with, was she with? It was a movie, quite a good movie. And she was the daughter of an actress, Hollywood actress called Anne Southern. Her name was Patricia Sterling, because her father was an actor, Sterling. And I said, she'd be just right, because I'd seen the movie. And we ran the movie with Bob, the Robert Parrish. And I said, what do you think, Robert? He said, oh, great, be absolutely perfect. Found out also that she was also with the same Universal. I had her under contract, so this was going to be easy. So we did it all without seeing her, and I got her to come over early so that we could costume fit her. And she walked in the office, and I thought, oh my God, I've made a terrible mistake. She was a hippie with a baby stuck on her. She looked pale, she looked exhausted, she looked disinterested. I think she was on drugs because she was just staring into space, you know. And I said, oh, it's, you know, lovely seeing you, and how are you? And the baby had something wrong with it, so I got that sorted out, Pinewood. And she was totally listless. She didn't want to do anything. So I took her into wardrobe, and she didn't care, and I thought, oh my God, I made this dreadful mistake. So I got Robert Parrish to talk to her, and I said, what do you think? He said, no. He said, you can't, she's off to the ferries. She's on some. She'd been living in a hippie commune in San Francisco. No one tells you that. So I tried so hard with her. I sat her down. I said, look, Patricia, you don't really want to be here, do you? She said, no, I don't. I said, well, darling, I don't think it's going to work out. If you don't want to be here and you're not interested in, you know, the role, and your baby's not well and all the rest of it, I think, you think you ought to go home? She said, yes. So I had to ring up and quickly get a replacement. And someone said, well, actually, Roy Thinnes is married to a very nice actress.
Hi.
Called Lynn Loring. And I said, oh, I've heard of Lynn Loring. Yes, she's done something. So we looked at pictures of her and everything, and we said, well, let's get her over, you know, because we were now running out of time. So she came over. She was like a tiny little thing. And it was the biggest mistake in the world to employ a husband and wife, because if she stayed late, he would get upset and go storming down the corridor and say, where's my wife? And if he stayed late, there was something else. And one day he said, where's Lynn? Where's Lynn? And I said, well, and we were just doing costumes and everything then. So I said, well, Lynn's down in the corridor. She's in makeup. We were trying out some makeup. And he said, I want her home now. And he walked to the end of the corridor and put his fist through a glass door. And I thought, oh, just to think that I didn't like puppets.
When the production crew on Doppelgänger began work 10 weeks ago, it was the first time any of them had used equipment like this. And to begin with, they were unsure of it. Now some of them go so far as to say it's difficult to work without it, and they want to take it on location when they go to Portugal next month.
But the final thing to the story is that she didn't tell us, but she was several months pregnant. She was so tiny, you couldn't tell. And we went on location to Portugal, and there was a scene where he plays the astronaut, and he finds out something, that she's on the pill or something, and he throws her into the pool. And I now know she's pregnant, so I went out to her and said, do you want to do this shot? She said, yeah, I don't care. So I said, but you're about 3 or 4 months pregnant. Is that wise? So I went up to the legal people. I said, look, if anything happens to her on this, how do we stand? They said, not a good idea. Can't you get a stand-in or something? So I said, oh, God. So I said to her, no, I think we'll work around this. So I went with the assistant director, scouring the beaches in Portugal, finding a stand-in for her. All these beautiful girls. I bring them back. Roy Thinnes is kind of interested, and now Lynn Loring is having a sudden fit, and she decides to throw us over in the pool anyway. I mean, we had a terrible time. I could go on.
One of the most important jobs in filmmaking is lighting. Now, instead of just using his exposure meter and an experienced eye, the lighting director can also refer to an oscilloscope attached to the television screen, which indicates the exact intensity of lighting in every part of the picture.
We had a very beautiful girl, Loni Friedl, who was a German girl. So there was a scene where she's in a shower, and John lit it to the director's instructions so that it was dimly lit, but artistically lit. So, you couldn't see much of her. Gerry suddenly found himself in the 60s, or 70s, where he thought it ought to be much more raunchy than that, and called John up to the office, said, John, I'm the producer on this, executive producer, Sylvia's the producer, you've got to do what I say, I want to see everything, And John said, well, no, I'm going by what Robert said. So he's torn between, the boss on a film set is the director. So Gerry gave an ultimatum to John, and Robert Parrish, who was an old crafty animal of the Hollywood, fame, while John was upstairs talking with Gerry, he got the set struck. So when John came down, he couldn't do it anyway because the set had gone. And of course that caused a big rift between Gerry and John, and unfortunately John went. So that was a very sad day for me, because it was I always left now as myself, Reg Hill, who was just hanging on by his fingernails. And then, of course, soon we were to separate. And then I didn't see John for a long, long time. I could see it all happening, So the fun went out of things. It wasn't the same. And it was such a pity, because it was fine when we were all struggling. But once we got there, there seemed to be nothing keeping us together, really. No glue. So that was it. But anyway, all in all, it all worked okay.